seems to be a little strained. Going forward, so the verdict has now been delivered. Going forward, how do you see that those ties between India and Bangladesh?
I personally feel that Bangladesh had a general image, or to, if I use the tougher word, visage, then in the imagery and the visage of Bangladesh was very much relevant for liberal people. It was considered to be a secular and liberal state wherein demos or the democracy idiom used to rule the roost. But since the time Muhammad Yunus has come to the seat of power, then since that time the jihadi elements, especially the Jamaat-e-Islami and other jihadist groups related to China and Pakistan, they have become prominent. So the general bonhomie and the general friendship and camaraderie with Rasina Hill and Dhaka that has actually dwindled to a great extent, and Mohammad Yunus is openly teaming up with Pakistan. For example, I can take an instance here, that is earlier on the ships from Pakistan bearing the goods and the other goodies used to come only till Sri Lanka. They were allowed only till Sri Lanka by Bangladesh, but now the same ships and shipments have been allowed to the Chittagong and Mongla ports of Bangladesh. So in a way, Pakistan happens to be the insidious factor, a nefarious factor as far as the reason for the deteriorating relationships between Dhaka and New Delhi are concerned. That is how I look at the larger problem, in the sense that India and Bangladesh were always co-partners. And Muhammad Yunus, before he was exposed by the global media and by the mandarins, used to be worshipped as a kind of a rural development messiah and as a kind of the rural bank and finance messiah. But the manner in which Sheikh Hasina has been thrown out of Dhaka, and how he has usurped the power and not even doing the elections right now, raises a lot of questions about India-Bangladesh relations. That is how I would put it, ma'am.
Absolutely. Sir, I would request you to please stay on with us. From student protest to a landmark tribunal verdict, here's a look at the key events in the case against former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, tracing the journey from her ouster to her conviction in absentia. So, I will take you through this entire timeline of events that has actually taken place. We will start since July 2024. Now, Sheikh Hasina's verdict timeline. In July 2024, student-led protests erupted. That's when this entire story actually started. We saw how Bangladesh was on the edge in July. Student protesters gathered across the country and they protesting against corruption, they were protesting against ill governance, and they were demanding changes in the entire nation. Then on August 5, 2024, Sheikh Hasina flees Bangladesh and protests culminate in Hasina's ouster. Now remember, during these protests, a lot of things were said and done. And what happened was a lot of protests went violent, and then Sheikh Hasina and her government had to take some actions. And obviously, we have been talking about all those allegations against her government of usage of force against unarmed civilians. When this got out of hand in August, as we pointed out last year, Sheikh Hasina had to flee the country. Next, when we look at September 4, 2024, arrest of KEP officials like key officials like former ICP Chowdhury Abdullah Al-Mamun and others. So on September 4, we see the key arrests that were being made. Now remember that an interim government is in place in Bangladesh currently, and those who were accused, including Sheikh Hasina fled the country, but there were other ministers as well who have been accused of crimes against humanity, and Mamun was one of them, and he was arrested on that day. Then October 14th, 2024, ICT reconstituted arrest warrants issued for Hasina. So, October 14th was that day when the ICT or the International Crimes Tribunal was reconstituted, and this trial and arrest warrant against Sheikh Hasina were issued. So, that is how this entire trial then started off. We can see that in October 2024, investigation report stated that Hasina was named as the principal architect of the entire violence that took place in Bangladesh. So, that report that was made by the ICT, it stated that Sheikh Hasina was the prime conspirator. She was responsible under her direct orders. All those those protesters were actually met with violent measures. Then on May 12, 2025, so we shift on to this year, formal probe report filed, 8,747 page charge sheet submitted. So, this is very important because the charge sheet file, you can see it's 8,747 pages, and today when they were even submitting evidence at the court during that verdict, we saw it was a 10,000 page document along with material evidence that was submitted against Sheikh Hasina. When we look at May 2025, Al-Mamun was taken into custody and he agrees to testify. Now, this is important because the interim government has been trying to build a case against Sheikh Hasina, and when Al-Mamun was agreeing to testify against all these charges, that is when they had a solid plan in hand. Now, June the 1st, 2025, charges were filed and trial begins in absentia. Now, one of the most important criticisms of this entire trial that is taking place is that it is happening while Sheikh Hasina is not present. It is happening in absentia. So, she is not present to defend herself or against the charges that have been levied against her. Now, June 16, 2025, warrants were issued for Hasina and Kamal, extradition requested. So, since we know that Sheikh Hasina actually fled to India, an extradition was sought, and it was requested that India actually transfers her back to Bangladesh so that this trial can actually continue. On July 2nd, 2025, Hasina sentenced 6 months in absentia for contempt. So, when she did not come back, when the extradition request actually failed, she was actually charged for 6 months of contempt of court. Then July 10th, 2025, formal indictment, 5 counts of crimes against humanity. So, July 10th was the date when there was a formal indictment and there were 5 counts of crimes against humanity against Sheikh Hasina. August the 3rd, 2025, main trial opens and Hasina called nucleus of crimes. So, August 3 is when the entire trial opens up, and Sheikh Hasina was called the nucleus of the entire conspiracy that was hatched and the nucleus of the crime that was committed. Remember, she has been charged with murder, attempt to murder, and even shooting at sight on unarmed civilians. Now, when we go on to the next slide, we will understand how this trial actually comes into play. On August 4, 2025, witness testimonies actually continue. So, all those who were witnesses of this entire violence that unfolded in Bangladesh last year in 2024, they come and they testify, they give their testimonials over there in the court. October 22nd, 2025, defense arguments presented, UN files urgent appeal. So, even the defense arguments were filed, however, the UN also filed an urgent appeal in this entire case. October 23rd, 2025, hearings conclude, 54 witnesses, 28 days, and verdict has been prepared. So, 23rd October was that date when the verdict was actually prepared, and so many witnesses actually also came forward. Remember, this is very important for this. Now, November 12 to 16, 2025, pre-verdict tensions, lockdown, violence in Dhaka. Now remember that just before, we are seeing today is the verdict day, the verdict is out. However, before that, we have been seeing a lot of violent protests again in Dhaka. It's again turned into a place which is full of chaos. We are also seeing the Awami League calling for lockdowns across the country because they do not want to adhere by the verdict that is going to be given out by the ICT. November 14th, 2025, verdict date announced and prosecutors seek death penalty. So this was the day, November 14th, when the prosecutors actually sought death penalty for Sheikh Hasina because of the crimes against humanity charges that were against her. November 17th, 2025, which is today, viewers, verdict has been delivered. Hasina has been convicted in absentia and death sentence has been pronounced. So that was the entire timeline of the Sheikh Hasina verdict, which we started off from 2024. This all started off after those student-led protests that started and how it was actually dealt with by the Hasina government. I want to go across again back to Mr. Manan Dwivedi. Sir, we want to understand, now that the verdict has been delivered, we are seeing that the Awami League is still maintaining its posture, even though it's a banned political outfit currently in the country. It's stating that it will continue to raise slogans for lockdowns across the country. It will make sure that this verdict is not followed, not abided by, and there will be continued violence across the country. So going forward, how can Bangladesh actually emerge from this? Because we as a country, their neighbor, we want free and fair elections to be held as soon as possible. So unfortunately, these protests don't spill onto our border areas.
I personally feel that that I would like to say here that there happens to be an old inclination, strategic and diplomatic inclination on the part of the South Asian countries, whether it be Bangladesh, because we are talking about Bangladesh, which is in a vitriol and turmoil situation right now, whether it is Nepal or whether it is Sri Lanka. The idea is that India was construed ideally or in the 1980s and 1990s as a kind of a hegemon. And that too, I would like to add the word here, as a kind of a benign hegemon, which always tried to dominate and domineer over the microstates. Now, what do we mean by these microstates? Microstates in the sense of countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, or to be more precise, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. So this was part of the concern of the Indian Prime Minister, Shri I.K. Gujral, in the 90s, who talked about this idea, and he actually contradicted this particular idea. That is Prime Minister I.K. Gujral in the late 1990s, that India is neither benign, India is not nor a hegemon as far as the foreign policy and diplomacy towards the South Asian countries are concerned. Now, I personally feel that Sheikh Hasina has been victimized by Mohammad Yunus
All
and
right,
by
sir, I'll come back to you. In fact, we have some breaking news for the viewers. Death sentence